So it all kind of happened in a hurry. It wasn't like a long chase where I had months and months to think about it and I was close. It all sort of just happened in a flash in January of '92, and I went for it from there.
And there it is, he's done it. Courier into the finals, he's the #1 player in the world.
How does a man who ruled tennis for nearly 60 straight weeks suddenly disappear from the spotlight as if he never existed? In the early 1990s, Jim Courier wasn't just another player. He was men's tennis, a fiery redhead with an unstoppable forehand and a work ethic that terrified his rivals. He climbed from a small-town kid in Florida to the world's #1. Yet, within just a few short years, that same man would fade almost completely from the public eye. No scandal, no injury, no dramatic farewell, just a quiet exit from the very world he once dominated. So, what really happened to Jim Courier? How did one of the hardest working champions in tennis go from lifting Grand Slam trophies to vanishing without a sound? Let's rewind to the beginning and uncover the rise, reign, and mysterious fall of the man who burned brighter than anyone, then disappeared just as fast. Born James Spencer Courier in Sanford, Florida in 1970, Jim was a quintessential product of the American tennis boom. He had to make an early, pivotal choice between baseball and tennis, ultimately committing to the latter. His path led him to the intense, competitive environment of Nick Bollettieri's Tennis Academy, where he trained alongside future rivals like Andre Agassi. Turning professional in 1988, Courier quickly established a reputation not for natural elegance, but for pure, unwavering work ethic and physical toughness. He was a grinder, a battler who relied on relentless preparation. His first major ATP singles title came relatively early in 1989 in Basel, where, in a sign of the resilience that would define his peak, he defeated the reigning world #1, Stefan Edberg, coming back from a 2-1 deficit. The true breakthrough, however, arrived at Roland Garros in 1991. Playing his friend and former academy mate Andre Agassi, in the final, Courier clinched his first Grand Slam title in a grueling 5-set victory. This win was not just a title. It was a statement. He cemented his place as a superstar by delivering his victory speech in surprisingly polished French, a unique and memorable moment for an American champion. What made his game unique was a combination of athleticism and a singular, devastating weapon, the inside-out forehand. Nicknamed the backside boogie, this powerful, heavy shot allowed him to dictate play from the baseline, forcing his opponents into impossible defensive positions. His game was one of attrition, consistency, and depth. He didn't just play the ball. He bludgeoned the resistance out of his opponents. This potent combination of relentless physical endurance and offensive firepower culminated in his ascension to the top of the sport. On February 10, 1992, Jim Courier officially became the world #1, a status earned through grit, sweat, and 4 years of brutal climb. The climb was complete, but it was in the next 2 years that Courier's dominance became undeniable, setting a record that proves his reign was not just effective, but historically unique. With the world #1 ranking secured, Jim Courier entered a period of peak domination that saw him solidify his place as the most feared competitor in the men's game. His success wasn't fleeting. He carried the momentum from the French Open straight into the next season. Courier achieved the rare feat of winning back-to-back Grand Slam titles at 2 different majors. He successfully defended his title at the 1992 French Open against Peter Korda, and immediately followed that up by capturing the 1992 Australian Open title, defeating rival Stefan Edberg in the final. But he wasn't done yet. In 1993, he defended his title again in Melbourne, securing the Australian Open trophy for a second consecutive time, once more against Edberg. This impressive run meant that in a short, devastating span from 1991 to 1993, Courier amassed 4 major singles championships. Perhaps the most significant testament to his early dominance and versatility was a record-setting feat. By the age of 22 years and 319 days, Jim Courier had reached the singles finals of all 4 Grand Slam tournaments. This achievement, reaching the final at Melbourne, Paris, London, and New York, made him the youngest man in the Open era to accomplish the career sweep of finals, a record that remains unbroken today. His style during this period was defined by an almost terrifying intensity. Wearing his ever-present white baseball cap, he employed a relentless, aggressive baseline game driven by his superior physical conditioning. He was a master of attrition, pounding shots deep into the corners, consistently hitting winners off his compact two-handed backhand and devastating forehand. Opponents knew they were in for a physical and mental war when facing him. This grit and determination allowed him to surpass the previous guard, notably Edberg, and briefly overshadow the emerging force of Agassi. He didn't just win. He established an exhausting rhythm of play that opponents simply couldn't sustain, making his run as world number one from 1992 into 1993 feel almost inevitable. His record of going a perfect 5 for 5 in Masters Series finals between 1991 and 1993 speaks volumes to his absolute mastery of the tour's biggest events during his prime. Yet that relentless intensity was a double-edged sword, and by the end of 1993, the mental cracks in Courier's armor would appear quite literally in the form of a novel. The year 1993 was supposed to be the coronation of Jim Courier's dynasty, but instead it marked the invisible turning point, the moment the cracks began to spiderweb across his foundation. While he started strong by securing his second straight Australian Open title, the rest of the season saw his dominance begin to slip, culminating in heartbreaking losses that shook his mental fortitude. The first major blow came at the 1993 French Open final. Having won Roland Garros for the last 2 years, Courier was fully expected to complete the three-peat. However, in a brutal, exhausting 5-set battle, he fell to the tenacious Spanish clay courter Sergi Bruguera. The loss was visibly crushing, but worse followed. Later that summer, he reached the final of Wimbledon, his best ever run at the All England Club, only to lose to the man who would ultimately define the decade, Pete Sampras. Although he remained world number one for much of the year, these back-to-back major final losses signaled that his competitive edge was fading. The tangible evidence of his waning focus came later that year. At the 1993 ATP Championships, the Masters, while playing against Andrei Medvedev, Courier committed a bizarre act that immediately became tennis folklore. During the changeovers, he pulled a copy of Armistead Maupin's novel Maybe the Moon from his bag and began reading it in his chair. This highly unusual, almost defiant display of distraction was a clear sign that the intense, single-minded warrior was mentally and emotionally spent. His coach, Jose Higueras, noted that Courier needed a detox from tennis, and even Courier himself later admitted he was fried and looking for a mental escape. The 1994 season confirmed the slump. For the first time since 1989, Courier finished the year without winning a single title. His signature relentless intensity, which had fueled his rise, had become a debilitating burden. The man who was once feared for his physical stamina now appeared exhausted. The sport's physical and mental toll had caught up to him, providing the opening for rivals like Sampras and Agassi to step fully into the spotlight. The reading of the novel wasn't an arrogant stunt. It was a visible symptom of a profound motivational issue that was already eroding his game. The visible slump was a sign of the deeper vanishing act taking place behind the scenes, a total breakdown of physical and mental stamina that led him to an early retirement. The losses in 1993, coupled with the telling reading a novel anecdote, marked the beginning of a rapid and painful vanishing act on the main stage. By the middle of the 1990s, Courier was no longer a perennial Grand Slam contender. His ranking steadily dropped, and he was quickly being overtaken by the consistency and evolving games of Sampras, Agassi, and other power players of the era. Courier's physical, power-based game, a style that demanded maximum effort on every single point, was proving unsustainable. The unrelenting grind that had lifted him to the top of the sport was now burning him out. He was honest about the internal struggle. In his own admission years later, he confessed to simply having lost interest, feeling profoundly tired physically, mentally, emotionally. For a competitor whose success was built on sheer, unadulterated will, the loss of motivation was a crippling defect. Adding to the mental exhaustion were physical problems. Though he initially hid it, Courier battled worsening shoulder and arm issues later in his career, which inevitably compromised the speed and effectiveness of his powerful forehand and serve. As the rest of the tour began to catch up to his fitness level and his strategy became more predictable, opponents learned to to attack his weaker backhand side to open up the court. These physical ailments made it impossible for him to execute the brutal, high-percentage game that defined his peak. His last significant highlights came not in individual tournaments, but in the unifying atmosphere of the Davis Cup, where he seemed to recapture his fighting spirit. He was an integral part of the winning U.S. teams in 1992 and 1995. Even as his tour results faded, he delivered classic marathon victories for his country, including an unforgettable 5-set win over Murat Safin in 1998 and another dramatic victory against Great Britain's Greg Rusedski in 1999, clinching the decisive match for the U.S. But the struggle to maintain world-class intensity was too great. Courier officially announced his retirement from the ATP Tour in May 2000 at the relatively young age of 29. The man who had once dominated the sport found himself ranked outside the top 50, choosing to step away rather than continue the slow, inevitable slide down the rankings. He chose to burn out rather than simply fade away in mediocrity. But for an athlete who stepped out of the spotlight so early, Jim Courier has built a surprisingly successful, high-profile legacy that keeps him at the heart of the tennis world today. Jim Courier's professional vanishing act on the court proved to be an unexpected reemergence in the commentary box. After retiring in 2000, he quickly and successfully transitioned into a career as a television tennis analyst and commentator. His profound understanding of the game, combined with his articulate, insightful, and often dryly humorous delivery, made him an immediate favorite with fans and broadcasters alike. He traded the grueling physical intensity of the baseline for the high-pressure precision of live analysis, a job he takes just as seriously, working over 150 days a year to be excellent at his current job. Beyond his pervasive broadcast presence at every major tournament, Courier used his business acumen to forge a second career. In 2004, he founded Inside Out Sport and Entertainment, a company that promotes and manages tennis events, including the successful senior circuit, the Champion Series. This venture allowed him to stay deeply connected to the sport in an entrepreneurial capacity. His leadership qualities were formally recognized when he was appointed the United States Davis Cup captain, a role he held from 2011 to 2018. Drawing on his own history of clutch, decisive Davis Cup performances, he led the American team with the same intensity he showed in his playing days. Regarding his public perception, Courier remains a respected yet intriguing figure. The most recent stories often highlight his commentary, such as his viral presence during on-court interviews. For instance, he was recently in the news in 2025 discussing his reaction when Novak Djokovic refused an on-court interview after a match, demonstrating his role as a key voice in current tennis dialogue. His legacy is now viewed through a double lens. He was undeniably one of the pioneering world #1s of the American tennis boom of the 1990s, a generation of power that took the sport to new heights. However, he is ultimately overshadowed in the history books by the career longevity and sheer Grand Slam counts of his contemporaries, Sampras and Agassi, and certainly by the modern era's Big Three, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic. Courier's career is a potent reminder of how quickly even the most intense dominance can fade when faced with mental fatigue and the relentless evolution of elite rivals. He is remembered as the hard-working, cap-wearing warrior who proved that sometimes desire alone is not enough to maintain a dynasty. So here's the big question. What can we all learn from Jim Courier's rise to greatness and his sudden retreat?